What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Dead Noise. I'm Chris, and thanks to the power of Zoom, I am here with the vocalist from the band Wounded Touch, Nick Holland. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, what's up, Chris?
So normally I like to say the genre of the band that I'm talking to, but I kind of want to have you answer that question because your band has a lot of different influences and it comes through in your sound. Like you have the obvious metalcore, hardcore sound. You've got some noise elements. There's obviously the rhythmic intricacies with mathcore and math rock.
Yeah,
So how would you define your guys' sound?
I mean, it depends on who I'm trying to get to listen to it, right? No, no, I'm not even gonna hold you up. Sometimes I'll be like, "Oh, it's metalcore," if I know that's what they lean into. But I feel like metalcore, mathcore are the two that we use the most, and then uh, some elements sound more like post-hardcore.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially when you look at your Finch cover from a few months ago, it's obvious to
Yeah.
hear the influence there. I also want to ask that, because I grew up being a huge Finch fan.
hmm
What made you decide to number one cover a Finch song, but also that specific one?
I mean, we're just not really into doing covering something that sounds to me if it's like sound if it sounds super close to us and we really want to play it. It's like we might as well just rip it off at that point. Like if it's just going to sound exactly like us. So I feel like we're all usually really into using a cover as an excuse to play something different.
Hmm.
Um, and we have like cover lists and stuff like that. Finch is something we've all been really into. And then when we talked about covering them, um, there were a bunch of songs, but like that was the one that came out the most consistently, especially because I feel like when that song came out, it was huge and it was a staple if you listen to them. And now it's only streaming in like 240p uh, on YouTube for the music video from the Underworld DVD. And otherwise, there was a live version of it. We couldn't find it anywhere. We were like, dude, we should just cover it and just so if anybody looks it up, it's our version. So
That's really smart.
I don't. I think that was just two of the guys in the band's high ideas. You know what I mean? The guys who do smoke. I think they were like, yeah, and I'm just like, yeah, it's a sick song. So however it works, I'm down.
Now, when it came to not obviously not imitating Nate's voice, but obviously taking inspiration from it, how difficult was it to kind of come at it with your own vocal style for a song like that? Because it is a little bit cleaner than some of your guys' music. So was that a specifically interesting adjustment process for you?
Um, I just requested when we covered it that we played in the exact key and tuning as them because it was just easier to kind of learn how to sing it the way I'd heard it growing up than to try to transpose it to like a different tuning or to bring it down. I was just like, let's just do it that way, and we'll see how difficult it is when we're in the studio. And it actually was a song that only took like a couple takes. It went really easy, for better or worse. So it was just easy to kind of do my version of him instead of trying to completely imitate him, but not also try to do something completely different.
I like it.
That's my very safe, my very my very boring safe answer.
Well, it sounds like an honest one, so I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Um, Oh, what was it? I really like what you said about sticking to doing it in the original tuning too, because so many bands, even the bands themselves, when they play something live, it's most of the time down-tuned, even if it's a brand new album. So as a fan, I appreciate it when you stick with the original key.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's even bands, like you said, doing re-releases of their records, and I liked what Thrice did with that one recently, but it was, them having to bring it down because they're older. I get it, but once I have it in my head in that tuning or that at that octave, I'm like, no, that's where it just has to sit for me now.
Yeah, absolutely. So your guys' new album, A Vivid Depiction of Collapse, comes out May 16th via Smart Punk Records. How excited are you for fans to finally hear it?
I'm really excited just to have it out. regardless of what it does or doesn't do. It a lot went into the record, a lot of stressors and everything to get it done, and the reception's been great just from being a band that's very DIY in some capacity, and we're aware of our size, yeah, or lack thereof as a band. So the reception that we get is always surprising to us. I never go into it expecting, I feel like right now, especially in the content demand era, you go in hoping for the next viral hit. And for me, I'm like, man, I hope this song breaks 1,000 plays, and then it does. And you're like, oh, okay, well, and then there's always a hump to get over. But the fact that people support it and share it always exceeds my expectations, which I try to keep low. And I'm really excited though, because as soon as we finish recording it, a lot of opportunities presented. By the time this airs, there will be a couple festivals that I think will be announced by then that I can't announce yet, though. I won't say it just because I don't know when the episode will fall, but
Hmm.
we had a lot of stuff line up as well as Furnace Fest this year and a couple other things, and a lot of shows that kind of presented themselves because of the record. So I'm eager to see what happens when the record drops, because our last record was kind of the same thing where the singles came out and they got shared, they did decent enough, and then it was once the record was out fully that stuff really started to happen for us. So I kind of am thinking it'll be the same with this. So I'm just eager and excited to see what it does, because I have no expectations at all other than the excitement of releasing it.
I love that mindset too, going in with no expectations but curiosity, so to speak. Because that's kind of how I approach what I do too. Because I never go into something expecting big results, but when it happens, I'm like, oh hell yeah. Um,
Right.
and like you said, a lot went into the making of this album. So how did the songwriting and overall recording process compare to that of your debut album, American Anxiety?
So that record was, and we've talked about it before, but it was unique because we wrote that in lockdown through voice memos and phone calls and stuff. This one was a record we were able to actually write in person, but we're a band that we don't operate very well without deadlines. We're just procrastinators. So we had a couple songs and we talked to the label, like, all right, it's time for the next release. We set a date based on Andy, who recorded us, availability, and then we're like, okay, we got 3 months. So we got 8 more songs to write. And then that was just kind of crunch time, just doing it like that, which, has its own problems and stuff. But we were writing up until like about 2 weeks before going into the studio. And it was stressful at the time, but I feel like that's just the way we operate. We aren't casual writers. So I think there's always a lot of franticness and anxiety that can be heard in the music because of it. Um, but it was very emotional because there was a lot of different stuff material wise this time around. On the last record, it was all right, do what we can and throw everything ideal we can, and just in case. And this one, um, we were a lot more conscious to not be safe with things and allow ourselves to write, okay, well, this whole song is going to be the mid-tempo song, or this whole song is going to be the experimental one with some clean vocals, not like trying to get little bits on every song. Instead, just trying to be a little more focused in. And I feel like it feels a lot more cohesive in that we allowed ourselves the chance to fail. Whereas I think on the last record, we were like, well, if we have a little bit of everything, something's going to stick. I feel like by the time we got to this record, it was like, hey, we might have a couple experimental songs that might not be what people are expecting, but they'll be fully fleshed out ideas, and it's what we want to do. So let's just go that route. And I think we were a lot more satisfied with ourselves and our performances. Whereas on the last one, you always wish you could do more. But I feel like I drove home this time going, yeah, I gave it everything I could.
My favorite song on the album is Every Grieving Piece. So I'm really
Yeah.
curious, like, what do you have any memorable stories from the making of that song or anything that sticks out to you when you look back at that?
So musically, we started to get towards the writing part, the end of the writing, and we were like, really starting to rack our brains. And Mike and Kyle, our guitarists, were in a band about 10 years ago. called Steamroller. And as that band was nearing its end, they had been writing stuff, and the two of them had been demoing stuff and sending it back and forth. They never did anything with it. And they had these two songs that they had emailed back and forth, the riffs of. And when we were coming up with ideas, they're like, yeah, I'm going to go through my email and see what I can find. And Mike found, I can't remember if it was Mike or Kyle, found a rough, like practice session demo of them just hammering that out. And we kind of took the skeleton of it and applied ourselves to it, but used that as our reference. And when Mike wrote it, I guess it was at a very emotional time that when he put it together, it kind of all hit him again using it. And I don't necessarily know the contents of the story of that, but I know it really hit him emotionally to be able to use that song on this record, which helped because then I had this chunk of lyrics I really wanted to use that really fit the vibe of that, not knowing what he had brought to the table with that song. So it made it this really sad, depressing track on the record that um, it felt like it meant a lot to everybody to put that one on the record, even though it was a brand new song. Everybody seemed like they were getting something out of using it, and it still is a song that all of us are very excited to play and put out there. And I'm excited that KZ from Dreamwell is on it as well, because Dreamwell had me sing on a song on their last record, and that kind of carried us with some stuff on social media for a while until our next release. So it's cool to be able to now have that cross association and have KZ on on our record. So there's a lot to that song specifically that I'm excited for people to hear.
I love asking about the artwork every time I get to talk to someone about an album or a specific release. And you guys in particular are kind of, you have a pretty engaging eye creatively with your artwork, especially that of American Anxiety. Like that instantly had me curious when I first got into you guys. So what can you tell me about the overall vision of the artwork for this album and what you were trying to convey with it?
Well, artwork's always been important to us too because and maybe it's because I'm older. I'm still from a time where I bought something at the store because of the cover. Whether it was a movie box art or whether it was a CD or something, the cover still had to grab me.
Hmm.
So to me, if you're phoning in your cover, what does that say to me as the listener about what you think of your music? So I think we all are still like, okay, what is the cover of this? And we go back and forth and butt heads sometimes on stuff, but usually we know when it's right. And Austin, who did the cover, he had done some work that we were a fan of. So we're like, oh, let's get him to do it. But um, we always joke about how much we all dig the Freddy versus Jason soundtrack and how big that was when we were younger. And for some, I don't know what it's not. There's nothing specific on there that's like that imagery, but just the layout of it, the coloring, everything reminds me of that soundtrack. And when he sent it to us, I pretty much was like, oh, subject wise, because it's got the mother holding the child and it's got the girl, but otherwise I was like something that's sad but very abrasive too. And he when he showed it to us, it was like, yep, we just knew right away, like, yep, that's the cover. So um, I remember when we showed that to the label before the music, they were super into it. So, and we've had, if anybody comments at all on the artwork, that tells me we're on the right track, because I've definitely seen bands release albums and you see the artwork and you go, oh, okay, and you don't mention anything about the cover. The artwork is just whatever. So when we usually release stuff and people have anything to say about the artwork at all, that tells me we achieved what you should with your artwork.
I'm so glad you mentioned the Freddy versus Jason soundtrack too, because I do want to ask, are you the horror fan of the group or is it all of you? Because I know on the opening track to American Anxiety, on Serrated Heartstrings, there was a soundbite from The Thing at the very
Yeah.
end. So I want to know whose idea was that and who all loves horror in the group.
That was me. I'm probably the biggest, but it's a definitely a band of cinephiles, especially like me, Kyle, and Jeremy, and Mike is super into it as well. And that one fit with both the time period, but there's three movie samples on that record, And there's one that nobody ever picks up in the song excerpts from a violent thesis during the two-step build-up. There's actually a sample from Martyrs kind of buried in there.
Oh.
It's the very, very, very end when they're speaking in French. When she says "keep doubting" and she shoots herself,
Hmm.
it's just barely in there. Nobody's ever picked it up, but it's just barely in there. There's the one from The Thing. Oh my God, I feel like there's one more movie sample on that record. Like, oh, there's something else from that's from Killing Him Softly. But this record, yeah, we do a lot of samples live too, and a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, definitely. But I would say the band recommended me for specifically your podcast because I'm considered like the horror movie guy.
Nice. There a sample on this album? I feel like I heard one. I just can't pinpoint what it was from.
Yeah, there's so in the song "The Damning Variable," there's samples from Alien and uh there's something from the audiobook from The Road. Oh, and I think there's one more somewhere in there that I can't a lot of the other ones we created, but there the song in track 2 right before the mosh at the end, there's a sample from Johnny Ace's song, which was one of my wife and I's songs when we met, but that's also one of the songs that plays in Christine.
Mm.
That between I can't remember the main character's name in Christine, but it's so there's some subtle things like that on this record too.
I think it was the Christine one that came to mind when I heard it because I was like, wait a
Okay.
second. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it was early in the album too.
Yep.
Um, so where did your love of here's a better question because this I have people asking me this all the time. Which came first for you? Was it horror or music that became the bigger passion for you at the earliest?
It would be horror for sure. That definitely came before heavy music. My I kind of inadvertently became a film snob as a kid without realizing that's what I was because my dad, uh, he's a firefighter as well, but he before that he worked in a drive-in when he was a kid, and they a lot of the shitty what are like the slasher underground stuff like the Burning and stuff. The one
Mm,
that did their little market circulations, they went to some of the drive-ins out in the sticks, a year or two after they had played, and this was one of those drive-ins, and they must have had some kind of fan base that was into it because I remember like I guess every Wednesday night they showed Dawn of the Dead, like stuff like that, like specifically. So I got to grow up, well, like being really into these what I didn't realize were obscure horror movies, and it kind of made me a snob, not realizing that they were obscure. I just like we in the internet age, you take for granted certain movies. Now, like I can remember certain movies you couldn't find physical copies of it. You had to watch bootlegs. I can remember how weird it was owning a physical copy of Cannibal Holocaust and being like, dude, you can't get this anywhere. Now you can, but there was still a time where it was a journey to find physical copies of certain stuff. And you were the guy who owned that film. Like, oh, blah, blah, blah owns Night of the Creeps. Let's go to his house and watch it. Like, you trade movies and stuff. And that's so not a thing now, but it still was enough when I was a kid where it made me a lot more of a snob than I probably should have been because, my friends were trying to show me the movies that I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Friday the 13th, part 4, cool. Hey, have you seen this? And, you want to watch like a Giallo or something like that. And but that definitely came before metal for me.
that's so cool. I feel like
So
I had a similar upbringing in the sense of becoming a snob and not realizing it because I also had a thing for obscurity. I remember one of my favorite movies is Silver Bullet, and
same.
I
Yo, I
remember.
got a silver bullet poster right down here
Do
too.
you really?
Yeah, here. I got one. My wife bought this for me one year,
Oh man.
my birthday, but yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so Yeah, no, Silver Bullet is a huge staple for my brothers and I in our household. That's awesome.
Dude, I remember back when nobody heard of that movie, and then as soon
Yeah.
as I made social media and started up Dead Noise, it's like everybody was talking about it. I was like, well, okay, that's cool. It's kind of I don't know if you feel this way, but like when something gets really big, it almost feels like you lose ownership of it as a fan.
Because it's
Um,
cool when you were that kid that showed everybody that movie, so everybody associated you with it.
yeah.
Like I remember you, I think it was USA Today. It was one of those stations they would always do like marathons, and I can remember Silver Bullet was like one of those films that was always on TV marathon horror film when they were doing like Stephen King stuff, but you couldn't ever find it physically anywhere.
Hmm.
And I still have a bullshit like transfer DVD copy, but I have a VHS copy that to me is still the mandatory way to watch it. I'll work my way up to um the Blu-ray of it, but I'm still married to my VHS copy of it, to be honest.
I'm still a DVD purist myself.
Mhm.
Same with CDs. Like I know vinyl has been making a resurgence, but I still buy CDs whenever I can.
Do you feel so? I drive my friends crazy with this. Everybody makes fun of me because I have DVDs more than I have Blu-rays, and people go, "Oh my God, DVD? Would you fucking just upgrade?" I'm like, well, first off, I'm still pissed that I had to upgrade my collection from VHS to DVD. I'm not doing it, and then on top of that, I'm kind of the mind that there's certain films I do not need to see an HD 4K restoration of. I don't need to see Pumpkinhead or Scarecrows or something in 4K. I mean, like specifically my Howling copy,
Mm,
I have a 4K one of it, and there's a scene where when D Wallace is in the booth in the beginning, right? They ADR'd I can't remember his name, plays the killer in it, Picardo. Um he's talking, they ADR'd it, but because it's blown up and it's brightened up, you can see that his mouth isn't moving and he's just kind of standing behind her. So it makes it surreal, but I don't think that's not what they were doing. It was just on that original transfer, it was so dark that he was only a silhouette. So they
hmm.
had to ADR his voice. Now, when you watch it blown up, you can see the fact that that's ADR and he's just staring at her, talking at a different rate, and just stuff like that. Where I'm like, I don't need to see this crisp, clear copy of Maniac. I want it to be dirty and grimy and have grain on it. So there's certain films where I'm like, I don't. I'm a DVD is as high of quality as 1080p is as high as this needs to be.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way. My biggest example that I use all the time is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre because that's the most obvious one. And
Mhm.
um The Howling is a good one too. I never thought of that. I
That was
would
just one of the first ones I remember noticing where I was like, fuck, I'm noticing stuff now that I feel like I'm not supposed it's like you're seeing the strings,
mm,
you know. And TCM is one where it was cool to see certain stuff blown up, but after I saw it, I'm like, okay, I don't need to see this. Let's go back to what looks like an old like 8 millimeter transfer. I don't need to see an H like when they did. I feel like they're always doing a 4K restoration of that, and I'm like, oh, fuck it, why, man?
yeah, for real. I Another one of my favorite movies, so obscure. I don't think anyone's ever heard of it. It's called The Exorcist.
Yeah, right,
Um,
right, right, right.
but I always feel
Super
like
underground.
there's a part of me that feels like that's one of those movies too that you don't need a 4K version of it because that's another one that feels kind of real because there's no music, there's not a lot of
Mhm.
music. Um, but I will say I saw it in the theater about a year, maybe 2 years ago with my old college roommates, and when you have a full surround sound system and a gigantic screen in front of you, I've seen that movie a million times, and there's stuff I didn't know. Like Reagan had a fish tank in her room, had no idea. And
Right.
then there's
Yeah, that's
all
I
sorts of
didn't
stuff
know
like
that.
that. And then like the transition into certain scenes, it's just like you pick up on things a lot more like that. And
Mhm.
part of me is like, man, I wish I would have noticed that the first time I watched it on my little 2x2 television.
Right.
But 99% of the time, I'm also of the mindset that not everything needs to be in HD.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certain it's kind of like there's this resurgence of like MySpace era deathcore and grind that like is getting pressed, and I'm like, man, I don't know if that shit was meant to be heard on anything other than maybe like a 94 Saturn's speakers blown out playing through someone's iPod shuffle. Like some of that stuff, I'm like, how good can this sound or better can this sound on vinyl
Yeah.
versus like a shitty download from SoulSeek? So, but some people swear by it and they swear by the remasters. A lot of the time, I can't tell the audio difference on a lot of remasters. Um, I can tell visual remasters on movies
Hmm.
for better or worse. But a lot of the audio ones, I'm like, the original intended format is good enough for me on a lot of stuff. Other than practicality, like it's easier to find DVDs than VHS.
Hmm.
My projector has VCR hooked up, but that one when it's easier to find, I understand it. But I won't go out of my way for a specific type of format. I just as long as I can have physical media, that's like the more important factor for me.
Yeah, especially in today's streaming age. And you don't know
Yeah.
what titles are going to be taken off of what platforms until it happens, and then
Hmm.
I can't stand that. So yeah, I'm a big physical media advocate myself. You can't see it behind me, but there I have so many DVDs and a gigantic CD shelf on the other side of my room. Um, and I was also gonna say to that point that music is kind of like that too. Like not everything needs to be crystal clear, and I think that definitely
Right.
goes for the type of stuff we listen to.
Hmm.
Um, Even with classic rock, like a band I grew up worshiping was Rush, and they put out an album in like 2002, I think, and it was a victim of the loudness wars at the time, and it was just
Hmm.
very distorted. So they remastered it and completely remixed it and released it like 10 or 12 years later. To this day, I still can't get into the remaster because I'm like it's just not
Yeah.
it. I know the intention was for it to not be the same, but it just doesn't make sense for what that meant at the time and all this and that.
I
Yeah.
think the only remaster like that I've really been really thankful for was um the hardcore band Left for Dead.
Mm,
When A389 did a Devoid of Everything, I always felt because the older recordings were so rough that that was a band where you knew those songs because you'd seen them live so many times and knew those songs, or you saw people cover it all the time. So to actually, they were that was well before my time. So to actually be able to get into them and have good recordings of it, I'm sure people from that time hated it, but for me to be able to have it and know what was going on, um, was cool because all you could find were transfers and bootlegs uploaded to YouTube. So maybe that's how people feel if you didn't grow up watching low resolution films. Maybe that's how it feels to younger people now watching movies in anything under 1080p.
yeah, for real. Or I always hear this a lot, like, because I love the Universal monsters. So, like, and everyone in my generation is like, it's black and white. How can you watch it? I'm like, bro, you don't even know how good these
Right.
movies are. And the fact that people don't give it a chance just because of the technology at the time or lack thereof is incredible these days.
I think especially if I was going to introduce somebody at this point to like my son when he's old enough, I feel like I'll start with the latter half of Universal, like something like I feel like Creature from the Black Lagoon feels more modern than like Dracula when Dracula, they were still calling them talkies then,
Yeah.
and it was like a newer format that they were trying to figure out. Whereas by the time they got to Creature and those films, I figure there was some stuff to the format that is still around today, and that's still like the werewolf is my favorite monster, but I still think that's my favorite Universal one is Creature.
Mm.
That's one I would like to still see a remake of, not like an homage like The Shape of Water, but like a straight remake. I think that would be the one I would still get really into if somebody did it like that.
I
I
always
did
get
like that one.
curious to I always get curious about how John Carpenter's remake would have gone in the 80s when he
Oh,
originally.
I forgot about that. I forgot about that. Yeah, it probably would have been it like. Well, I guess I want to say body horror, but it could have been just straight camp. It could have been like Big Trouble. It's tough to
Oh,
say in the 80s, because he was ping ponging by the time he got to the latter half of the 80s.
that's true.
I'm a Carpenter apologist, though. I love Prince of Darkness.
Oh,
Uh,
same.
Prince of Darkness. I know it has its flaws, but I revisit that one as much as The Thing. Like I love that movie. Just is a great Halloween movie for me. So, but the I would his my favorite film of his. I love The Thing. I'm getting a Thing tattoo, but like I have a Fog tattoo. Like The Fog is, I still think, my favorite Carpenter film.
That's a really good one. I always flip flop because obviously with the classics being Halloween and The Thing, like,
Yeah,
but you got. I also love Prince of Darkness. I also love The Fog. Christine.
Christine's
Um,
great too. I know he doesn't dig it, but I love Christine.
I love when people ask him about The Thing, and he's like, "Where were you guys when it came out?" Because
Right,
nobody liked it
right.
when it first came out. Um, but
Which
that's
is weird to me. That's so weird because it's so objectively well made. It blows my mind that like certain films I get being flops at the time
Mhm,
and people rediscovering them, like Season of the Witch, right? Or Exorcist 3. I
mhm.
understand those having to find their crowds, but The Thing is so objectively good, mind-blowing effects, and like a pretty traditional narrative. I have no idea how it ever struggled when it came out.
I
That blows my mind.
I feel like it's one of those things where it was just that much ahead of its time because
Yeah.
you look at The Fly in the 50s and it was the same way. It wasn't until the Cronenberg remake in the 80s when people really paid attention to that story. And the original Fly was like
No.
56, I think.
Yeah, and
And
if I remember correctly, like that wasn't because both came out before I was born. So I think I remember hearing that like The Fly was never like a highly regard. It was always B camp,
mhm.
even for like Vincent Price and until the Cronenberg remake. Obviously, I that's nothing I can necessarily verify off the top of my head, but I feel like I remember hearing that too. Like it was never really that highly regarded originally.
I feel like it was also a victim of the sequels because the original was in color and the two or three sequels were in black and white and they were really campy with their effects and Vincent Price. It
I
yeah.
never saw Return of the Fly, or I guess I didn't know there was a third. I remembered Return of the Fly, which I never saw. So there's a couple sequels then.
I think there's one or two, I can't remember.
Okay.
Um I still need to see the 80s sequel because I love the first one so much I
Oh,
just keep watching that.
it's it, it's to me it's more Guyver than it is The Fly, but it's got some gross, nasty effects in it. Like for that alone, it's worth watching because it's got some really cool monster effects in it.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah,
That's good to
lots of
know.
goop and slime and skin melting off people. So that alone makes it worth watching.
Hell yeah. Well, I also really like what you said about the Universal monsters because that's kind of how I feel about when I pick my favorites and what to show people because my all-time favorite movie ever, you can probably tell behind me, it's Dracula. Um,
Mhm.
but that was such a groundbreaking movie and it was very you can tell it was a product of of its time being the first sound
Mhm.
horror movie. But like you said with the Wolfman and the Creature from the Black Lagoon, they had it down by that point with incorporating music and effects and everything. So
Yeah,
those
because they
two,
didn't even they weren't even doing scores yet
yeah,
by Dracula. They were just doing like I was actually just listening to a podcast about this not that long ago, but like all they have is Swan Lake in there, and it's um music that's playing in the scene when they're in the theater. Otherwise, there's no music. Um, it's just incidental. Whereas by the time they get to Wolfman, there's a score.
yeah. It's the same thing with the Invisible Man because
Mhm.
that was a masterpiece of visual effects even today. But there's still like no music and it's really bumpy
Mhm.
with sound design and stuff. So yeah, 8 or 9 years later with the Wolfman, that's when it was down to a science. And
Yeah.
Have you seen the Wolfman remake
I
earlier this
haven't.
year?
I haven't. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna give it a shot. But I like how they modernized the Invisible Man because the Invisible Man was always sci-fi.
Hmm.
So I thought that was a cool way to do it and like, the madness of power. But Wolfman to me, I still just wanted to be supernatural or even just if it had if they were going to go the scientific route, it being like somebody who had just some product of evolution or something, but what them turning it into a virus, it to me made the werewolf lore almost irrelevant because then at that point it could be anything. It could be he could be turning into any kind of creature. It could be a zombie story, and like the disease aspect of it really just when I saw that in the trailer, I was like, okay, I'll get. I would have rather them leaned into pentagrams and old school werewolf stuff than to try to make it a disease. I would rather just see something because at this point that would be more wild than the disease process. Um, that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bad. I haven't read any reviews of it. I'm waiting to till I sit down with it. There's a lot coming out this year. I'm excited to see too. I'm really holding out for 28 years later
Mm,
this fall. I can't wait for that. So
I'm
there's a lot of
excited.
stuff I can't wait to get to this year.
Yeah, I'm already looking ahead to next year with Scream 7. There's a lot going on with that franchise over the last couple years, but every time there's a new movie, I get excited regardless.
That's an interesting one because I feel like by four I was so checked out
mm,
and I didn't think it would do more beyond that. And then by the time it got to six, everybody I knew who was checked out was so back in and fully invested that I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to sit with these and watch these because people whose opinions I respect very, very highly have been like, no, it's great. So I'm gonna have to get around to sitting down with that entire series again.
yeah, f five is really good, and as far as a reintroduction to the franchise, they did a really good job. I I always worry when they make movies like that in such close proximity to each other, they run out of things to talk about.
Yeah.
But they managed between 5 and 6, even though it was like a, a year apart from each other, they still managed to do some different things. So, and obviously the status of the cast and everything with the seventh one, they've got their hands tied a little bit. So I'm kind of curious to see where they go with it.
I'm wondering if everybody coming back are they gonna go super meta or is it gonna be dream and nightmare sequences?
Same, because I was always of the belief. I'm sure you hear about this a lot, but whether or not Stu is alive, like that
Right.
theory, I
Right.
I hated that. But and now that he's coming back, everyone's like, "Oh, I told you he's alive." I'm like, "Well, we don't know yet. We don't know yet."
Right. You could have a copycat who like they could go some really weird route where somebody like got cosmetic surgery to look like him to live that series could go in any route and I feel like if it seems like the obvious route they're not going to go that way.
Exactly. Now, how do you feel about the concept of remakes in general? Like, are there any movies that you feel could benefit from having a remake?
Yeah, so that's my problem with them is there are certain movies where it's like it should be remade. There are so many great ideas that just couldn't be pulled off that I'm like, okay, if I saw a remake of that, I would be all in. But it's always a remake on something to just cash in on IP.
Hmm.
I get the producer aspect of it. You have a built-in fan base, but there's shit where I'm like, man, like I would love to see someone actually do like Tombs of the Blind Dead and do slow moving zombies and like the Templar religious aspect and make it really surreal. Or so I have a list. Like I would love to see a Pumpkinhead remake
Hmm.
now. I would love to see Tombs of the Blind Dead, and I would love to see the movie Prophecy. Not
Wow.
not the Prophecy with Christopher Walken, the eco horror one with the
Hmm.
bear. Yeah, that I would love to see. Stuff that was a cool concept that just wasn't pulled off quite right. Um, and then I think the other one is Race with the Devil.
I
Is that
haven't seen that one.
with Peter Fonda where they're in the RV? That
I,
one, that one's awesome.
I gotta
But
watch that.
it craps out in the last 5 minutes. I still feel like they didn't know what to do.
Oh, that's
So
the worst.
yeah, it could be really, really good now. Um, so I'm all in on remakes for stuff that it's like, okay, this we could redo this and give it the push it needs. It's when it's something where it's like, dude, I don't need another reboot of some like just do what they did in the 80s and rip it off and pretend like you didn't rip it off.
Yeah.
You know, like do what the Prowler did and just be a rip off and just try to be your own proud thing. Not, oh, well, why don't we just how about we just reboot Candyman, but now it's in Antarctica or something, or just there's always some goofy spin. I'm like, just rip it off and call it something else, and then you'll get the IP from the fans who want something like that, while also not being held to the standard of the thing. Now, if it's a sequel, I'm in.
Mm.
Like, I love that 2018 Candyman wasn't a remake or even a reboot. It just was a like a legacy sequel. I thought that was fucking awesome. I just wish it was a different name.
Mm.
Like, I wish people had the courage to go. We're gonna call it Candyman 4, or or something like. But no, that's me on remakes. I don't hate them when it's the right film that's being remade. What about you?
I'm kind of the same belief. I think that some movies are bet. There's a lot of remakes that I think obviously shouldn't have happened, but there's also a decent handful that are better than the original in some aspects. Like you look at The Fly or The Thing. A lot of people
Yeah,
don't know those are remakes, but that's because they're that good.
right.
Um, but in more recent years, like you said earlier, The Invisible Man, I it was a different direction, and I love the original Universal monsters, so I'm always going to prefer those. But it was a new concept and a new direction that I really liked with the new one. Um, Even like the miniseries with Tim Curry, just didn't do it for me outside of his performance.
Yeah,
But
he's the only reason to watch that one. I wish with those, I do like that they made it. I get that they lean more into the book's fantasy elements. I wish
mm,
they just would have let Skarsgård be Skarsgård and done less CGI. Like,
yeah,
all you had to do was put that dude in creepy makeup and let him be himself, and he was it. He just nailed that. It was when it was him, but then he'd stretch to be 40 feet high, and he'd be like digital. Like that's where I was like, okay, well now it's crossed the line from scariness to me, but I don't think it's any. It's not. It's not like it's worse than the miniseries.
yeah.
So no harm, no foul on that one, regardless of. And hey, it was a huge success. So what is my opinion on that one? But
Um, how'd you feel about seeing him in? Did you see him in Nosferatu?
that's another one I'm waiting to sit down with.
Ooh,
I was something where I was like, when it hits, I couldn't make it into the theaters, and then when it hits streaming, I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna watch. I'm gonna watch this on my home theater when I can just sit down and commit to it. I'm not watching this on my phone
hmm.
or in the middle of the day in my living room. I'm gonna wait till I can sit down with this one.
Yeah,
But
it's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
uh it's a longer one, so yeah, that's definitely one that's worth the time.
It's funny. You can tell me if I'm wrong or not. I watched the trailer and I'm like, man, this seems like it owes just as much to like the 90s Bram Stoker Dracula as it does to Nosferatu.
You're
Like,
exactly right.
yeah, okay, because some of the stuff in the trailer, I'm like, this feels like it's so influenced by Coppola's film,
Hmm.
like, which now to me is the definitive vision of Dracula, is because that came out. I didn't grow up with the Hammer Dracula's. Like, to me, it was Universal, and that's still a big blind spot for me is the late 50s to early 70s Hammer films that
Mm.
I want to get into those and sit with those. But I would say that is still a huge blind spot for me. But yeah, anyway, circling back, I want to see that. I was really stoked when I heard Skarsgård's voice in the trailer on that one.
Yeah, It's a really good performance. And as someone who, like, I also love Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Nosferatu, the original Nosferatu was probably the thing that got me into horror in general. So, yeah, like you said, it was the perfect mix of both, and it was
Can I
real.
ask you how you discovered Nosferatu? I want to. Well, actually, let me start by asking, how old are you?
25.
Okay, so you might, because I'm 36, so this might we probably did in the same way. But how did you discover it?
So I didn't realize it at the time, but it was probably SpongeBob.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but I also had this book, and at Barnes and Noble when I was like 7 or 8, there was this book in the very front when you walk in, and it had Dracula, Bela Lugosi's Dracula on the cover, and it was called A Field Guide to Monsters. And I read that like it was the Bible every time I was
Yeah.
in school. And there was a page on Nosferatu, and there was a picture from when he's in the ship, and it looked just like what was
That
on SpongeBob.
when he does the when he sits up like
Yeah.
that. So what's funny to me is mine was from Ernest Scared Stupid.
Oh, okay.
Like in the very beginning, have you seen that?
Hmm.
So the whole beginning, it's all the montage of the old films, and it's the shot of the shadow going up the stairs. And even in that goofy movie where it's like cutting to Jim Varney going, and making faces, that shadow shot creeped me the fuck out as a little kid. I always wanted to know what it was from. And then I saw it years later in a book similar to you, and I was like, I have to watch that, and then realized that it was in my library.
Oh man.
So that was another one that was like, but just a goofy way to find it because it's in the public domain, so everybody can rip it off and use it.
That's true. I know at the time when I saw it, it wasn't on YouTube or anything. Ironically enough, it was on Netflix, like it was streaming on Netflix, and I think what happened was I saw it in the book, and then I Googled it, and like I saw this like fan edit video of it was the Blue Oyster Cult song Nosferatu. Blue Oyster Cult's one of my favorite bands.
Okay, hell yeah,
So they had a song called Nosferatu, and someone took footage from the movie and put it in with the song.
yeah,
And so that was my first time actually really seeing more of it in motion. And then when I saw that it was on Netflix, I watched it. I was really sick when I watched it, so that kind of made the whole thing even more impactful for me because
yeah,
that was my first silent movie. I didn't know what to expect, and the music was really trippy, and yeah, it was an experience.
yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah, I love the classics. Like I'm sure you might have gotten this too, but like growing up, I was always called an old soul. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. No, for sure. That was my wife still makes fun of me because I grew up, hanging out with my grandparents a lot. So I'd watch old
mhm.
movies and eat like oatmeal raisin cookies and shit like that. So yeah, I that still is because and that was the other thing too is I brought up my dad, but like my grandparents were all into movies. On my mom's side, it was more literature horror, but with my grandparents, we were always watching scary movies. They were watching older stuff like the movies like Them
Mhm.
and stuff like that, but still Night of the Living Dead, them, and then another movie that I love still to this day. I can't wait to watch it with my kid. Is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein?
Yes,
That
that's the
is,
best.
and it's still. My wife and I watched it again. I hadn't watched it since I was a little kid, and her and I watched it one night, and I was like, she hadn't seen it, and she was still laughing. Like the humor in it still holds up. Like it's still so damn funny, and I remember there's still parts in it that are like scary. Like I remember, to me, the Wolfman is like he is still terrifying in that. Like that
Yeah.
transformation scene on the phone. I'm like that is still just as scary as anything in the Wolfman.
Oh yeah, for sure. But
That one's still awesome.
out of all the Abbott and Costello Meet the Monsters, that's definitely the best.
Yeah, that and then to me, Hold That Ghost. I don't care about any of the other ones, but that and Hold That Ghost.
Yeah, I it's funny you mention that because I kind of had a similar experience with my grandparents, mainly my grandma, because they both watched Turner Classic Movies a lot, so they were
Yeah.
really into old movies. So they would show me like the this gigantic like catalog that they would get every year. and I would immediately flip to the horror and sci-fi sections, and that's how I would find even more movies. And I ended up getting my grandma into Nosferatu. So now every
Okay.
time she visits, she's watching Nosferatu.
Oh, that rules.
Yeah,
That
it's
rules
so
so
cool.
hard.
Because she was never the type of, she never really liked scary movies even back then. But like now she loves Nosferatu. Like she ended up buying a DVD for herself, like because she lives in Florida. So like she
Mhm.
ended up going on Amazon and just buying her own because she was sick of waiting till the next time she would visit with us.
Yeah.
Um,
I, dude, my grandma got me into like more modern stuff too, like Tremors and
oh,
stuff like that when I was a kid. So like it wasn't just the old ones either. We watched a lot. Like her house was more of the sci-fi stuff, like big monsters, big aliens, creatures,
mhm.
stuff like that. But no, that was another source of scary movies for me as well.
I remember showing my grandma Silver Bullet, and she doesn't have a great tolerance for scary movies or being scared in general. So, the very beginning, when the railroad guy's head gets chopped off, she's like, "What the fuck?" Oh my God.
That so that's a movie that it would be blasphemy to me if that got remade unless it was the right person
Hmm.
remaking it and it still had an outlandish Uncle Red.
Yes.
Because there are so many scares. I haven't read Cycle of the Werewolf, so I really don't know what is unique to the movie and not the edit and isn't from the story. But like that whole kill sequence in the fog reminded me of growing up here in Michigan, like during hunting season, like going out in the woods and there's fog everywhere, and it's like I could relate to it so hard. I was like, I still don't know if that's in the book, but to me, I'm like, man, this scene could still just work as effectively today as it did then, and it's crazy to me that that is still a slept on movie. And when people talk about werewolf films, they don't mention that one as often, and
Hmm.
that's still crazy to me because that was such a staple. Like the two biggest staple werewolves for me as a kid was that werewolf and the one from Monster Squad.
Yeah.
Like those were the werewolves when I was a kid.
Now I gotta ask you this because this was something my college roommate and I both agreed on. In Silver Bullet, probably the one that scared us the most, the church scene with the
Yeah.
nightmare sequence. How did that go for you?
Oh, the idea of like more than one werewolf, like you're in a chapel filled with them, but like, yeah, the Reverend he was torn apart, like, or when they're all crawling towards him, the other ones come out of the coffin, like,
Oh,
yeah, that's a sample I've been wanting to use for a while. I keep thinking somebody's gonna use, and they haven't. Is the part when he, after that nightmare, he goes, "Let it end, dear God, let it end." Like I want to use that in something so bad.
oh,
So
please do.
I'm waiting to like you. Maybe that'll be in the next record, but I've been wanting to use that one for a minute.
How do you decide which ones to use?
If it just applies to the part, what the song's about, or it just matches, and usually the band trusts me. We
Hmm.
do a lot of that or equal like video game. Um, we do a lot of video game reference stuff too, like horror games. So, um, but usually that or something we're all into. Like one a movie we're all super into as a band is Event Horizon. That comes up
Oh,
all the time. So I'm sure that'll make its way in at some point. I just had to find a sample that Zayo didn't use on Liberate.
oh man.
But
Well, I feel like with a movie like Event Horizon, there's plenty of opportunities. There's a lot of source material that you could choose from.
well, or just the distress like signal period
Yeah.
or anything like from that one. Like, oh God, that movie. And I don't know if it's just the time it came out, and if you happen to grow up in a religious household, or I don't know what it is, but I still think that movie's scary as fuck.
Yeah.
Like even though we'll never get the real unrated version, and I like all the fan theories about that film, like how for some people that takes place in the Warhammer 40K universe, like that like that was a warp drive, and they went to the chaos realm, and then like to other people, it's canon that it takes place in the Hellraiser universe, and like the warp drive was a Lamarchan's configure or a lament configuration. Um, just that movie can be superimposed into so many universes, but it's still, no matter what you do with it, that movie is still so damn scary to me,
I
like to this
never
day.
I never thought of those theories. That's actually I'm gonna have to go back and watch that and try and see what I think now.
Like imagine if the warp drive as it's also a lament configuration, and that's where it goes, and the imagery and everything is so similar that like Dr. Weir could conceivably be a Cenobite or a version of that. Like it tracks. It's what
Dang.
it means. What it means is they just ripped off Hellraiser. You know what I mean? They
Yeah.
ripped off Hellraiser 4, but it's a fun little. I have fun little theories like that too. Like movies I pretend take place. Like I pretend that. So this is a question I have for you. What is your definitive Halloween? You know, because there's so many different branches. What to you is the Halloween branch? Is it, one, two, H2O? Is it the Cult of Thorn, or is it original in the Hollow Green trilogy? Like, because for me, Halloween is Halloween 1, 2, and then there's H2O down here. Resurrection didn't happen, right?
Hmm.
H2O, she cuts his head off. In between is the fog. That's Lori hitchhiking her way out to the West Coast because it takes place on the West Coast because she ends up in California for H2O, and because she's changing her name and she's hitchhiking out to the West Coast, and that's something that happens to her on the way out to California. So to me, I watch 1, 2, the fog, and then H2O.
Holy shit.
And it's just my bullshit little because I watched them all together at the same time as a kid. But to me, that's my bullshit little series, and that's my season of the witch is in the middle. But thinking about that made me want to know what it, to you is the Halloween series, which arc?
That's tough because like I know a lot of people hated the recent trilogy for some valid reasons. I enjoy as movies, I enjoyed them. I thought they were all entertaining in different ways. I would have to say one, two, H2O, and then like you said, act like Resurrection never happened. But it's tough for me to say that because I love Halloween 2018. I don't know, maybe that's a generational thing, but I
So
mm,
I know people hated Ends. To me, I feel like Ends is the movie they wanted to make and they couldn't.
yeah.
Like that should have been the movie. Halloween Ends should have been, this town has been haunted since the 70s. It's been they've been on the boiling point. All this fucked up stuff has happened. Maybe like some police brutality cases. Like this town's been on the boiling point for decades.
Hmm.
And all it takes is this one kid to kind of fuck up enough where it's just kind of another teenager killing somebody, and they turn on him, and he goes in the sewers. And Michael Myers has been living there the whole time, eating like stray dogs and shit, and killing whoever wanders down there, and that's it. And then it follows the same path, and then you can have the arc with Lori. But
Hmm.
to me, erasing the brother and sister thing makes the entire point of stalking her useless.
Yeah.
That's why Carpenter did it, because he was like, okay, well, why else? Why is he still coming after her? Like when they made the sequel, so it's like, oh well, it's his sister.
Yep.
Whereas in the first one, she doesn't know about him until he shows up. She just happens to be the babysitter he's following. So they had to come up with a reason for, well, why her?
Hmm.
So this whole trilogy is based on you, the viewer, being bought into the series and their rivalry, and them not being siblings is just a new take on it. But I feel like if you're young enough and brand new, I feel like if I was young enough and I had only seen the original and then went to 2018, I'd be like, well, why is he following this? What's the big deal about her?
Yep.
That was just the one. he didn't pull off killing Loomis or what's her name? The nurse that's with Loomis in the very beginning. So why Lori? So that's my problem with it is it requires you being all in on the entire series and then having to throw it away to get rid of the brother sister thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree that Ends was the movie that they probably wanted to make the entire time. I feel like that's why it didn't do so well, especially with fans, is that they waited until the very last movie of the trilogy to really
Switch it
explore
up.
their. Yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't the right thing to do. Even though I kind of liked that they were trying something different, doing it at the literally the 11th hour was not the best
Right.
move.
Like that should have been the first film.
Yeah.
Like if they would have done something like that in the first film and it would have been a whole Corey Cunningham trilogy, I think it could have worked. But yeah, to give it a soft remake type vibe in the first one, and then the second one is like a Friday the 13th type like goofball. I don't know what the fuck. So here's my
Evil
thing.
Dies Tonight.
I'll say this though. The beginning of Kills, the whole flashback to the 70s,
Yeah.
and then they catch him and it's almost like they didn't say it, they didn't give a time, but it's almost like midnight, it's almost like Halloween ended and he just shuts off, like he froze again,
Hmm.
and then they arrested him. I was like, and then they did, I was like so in, I was like, this is so fucking cool, and it just never was cool again. But the opening of that, I was all in
Same.
on that part. And then after that I just didn't care. And then Ends, I watched in fast forward, just kind of jumping around, and then I wanted to just see them put Michael Myers through the shredder.
Yeah. They yeah, especially Kills. My one of my roommates from college, he despised Kills. For good reason, because I also agree. Like the first beginning of it was amazing. They just didn't go anywhere with it, and then you just spend the rest of the movie in the hospital chanting "Evil Dies Tonight," and it's like, why?
Right.
Why did we do this?
They could have just redone Halloween too. They could have just
Yeah.
had him go to the hospital and fall, like they to this whole series based on he escapes to come after Lori, and then in the second one you put Lori in the hospital, and then it turns out, oh well, actually it's about the trauma he inflicted on Haddonfield, and it switches up. It's like, well, hang on. Well, then what the hell was the whole point of focusing on her in the first one?
Hmm.
I, they jumped around a lot, and then I don't know if I feel like you could do a super edit where it's just Halloween and then it's Halloween ends and it's flashbacks to the first film
Hmm.
or something. I know there's some stuff that wouldn't work, like the one neighbor whose husband got all the knives in him and stuff, but like
Yeah.
um to me that would have been a great film if it was about that like PTSD of the first one. But yeah, but I also don't hate the Cult of Thorn thing. I'm not gonna lie. I like Curse of Michael Myers. Some people dog on part six. I like part six. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. That was one of the first ones that I saw at a young. It was playing on like AMC Fear Fest or
Hmm.
something, and which was
Yeah, they
also
only
how I saw
showed.
Silver Bullet. It was AMC Fear
Yeah,
Fest.
they only ever showed fucking Halloween 4, 5, and 6,
Yep.
and then on Halloween night you could watch 1 and 2. But they only so that's why I'm burned out on 4. I don't care about 4 the way some people do. 5's terrible. I still think 6 is fun, but it has the two best Michael Myers to me are the Michael Myers in Halloween 2 and Halloween 6. Those are the two best versions of, like, I like and I respect Nick Castle in the first one, but Dick Warlock in the second one to me is Michael Myers.
I can respect that. Yeah.
He is so sinister in the second one that like it that's what I picture. But when I was a kid, they always showed him back to back,
Yep.
like always, and that's how I always watched it. So it's hard for me to separate 1 and 2. Like to me, they were always brother and sister because by that point the films were 20 years old after I was born. And then I always saw them back to back. So to me, that's the story. Is she ends up at the hospital and he pursues her like and so I'm too married to that at this point.
I like that though. That's a good way to look at it. Um, Speaking of like requels and maybe not approaching IPs the best way, did you see Exorcist Believer?
No, I was out. So when I thought they were gonna do something with it, and I was already pissed about the Halloween series, so I was already like, no, whatever. I know
Yeah.
it. And so I have my own feeling. Like when they showed the trailer and then when they were doing the flashing, and it showed like the dogs fighting and stuff, I was like, dude, if they go like animalistic with this and really primitive, this could be cool. And then the whole "We Are the World" ending with the different. But what's crazy is it's like I get what they're saying with communal like relations and different religions, but ultimately
Hmm.
it's not different religions. It's like three types of Christianity and voodoo. It's like that. It's not like they had a priest, a rabbi, a voodoo priest, and then like a monk of some like Asian Pacific religion. Like it's fucking like Protestant, Catholic, Baptist, and voodoo. Or and then I was some half-assed way. I don't know. I thought it was bold to send the one child to hell in the end. I think that's the only unique thing they did about it. But otherwise, I like the joke of it's The Exorcist if there was two possessed girls. I like, and you know what's funny is I love the original,
Hmm.
but dude, the third is the one I watch the most, and I know that makes people roll their eyes because the third has been rediscovered recently and reappraised. But
It's good though.
I always loved the third one, and I'm not talking like director's cut or the producer's cut. I mean like the theatrical release of the original
Hmm.
Exorcist 3. I think is awesome. It makes my skin crawl. Like I think it's still so good. Um, I also saw The Beginning in theaters in high school when that came out. You know what's funny was I remember really liking that one when I was a kid. I watched it recently. It's trash. But how do you feel about the sequels compared to the original,
So,
including Believer?
well, my thing is, I actually, one of the first videos I did on the Dead Noise channel was talking about how much I hate Exorcist 2. I still firmly believe that's not only the worst sequel ever made, that's one of the worst movies I've ever seen, if not the worst.
It's
Exorcist 3,
paced. It's paced so weird too. It's like,
yeah,
well, who directed that? That's
John Borman.
And Borman now says like he intentionally made it as different as he could from the original, and now and he
It's,
I and he retroactively, I guess he was like, yeah, that was the wrong thing to do. I should have given them what they want. Um, yeah, that it is so weird, and then like the perspective of the locust flying around, and it's so goofy.
he should have given the job to somebody else because he didn't even like the original one. And
Right.
that's probably my biggest hang up is like why would you pick someone to direct the sequel when you didn't like the first one? And the first one was
Yeah.
a home run. It was a critical success. It was a commercial success.
Yeah. I don't know why they did Borman too. Like, and I know like Borman was successful, but like they could have gotten like Ken Russell or so many like blasphemous, like, okay, in some alternate universe, there's a Lucio Fulci sequel to The Exorcist, but not beyond the door or like some Italian ripoff, like a true blue like art house sequel to it. Um, but yeah, no, but anyways, I cut you off. Like, what do you like? There's the whole two versions of the fourth film, like between Exorcist, the beginning, and Dominion.
I despise it. I think I don't think either of them should have been made in the first place, to be completely honest. I do really like the third one and what it did, and talking more about Father Karras's character. Um, Probably my favorite thing about it is again the cinematography, and you look at the very beginning and just walking through Georgetown at
Mhm.
night. That's the creepiest thing. Like I
Is
know,
that monologue like I have a dream about falling downstairs? Like
yeah,
it's oh, it
and
makes my skin crawl, dude.
everyone talks about the jump scare scene with the,
Right.
but to this day, the very beginning is my favorite part of that whole movie. And
Yep.
Believer, I wanted to like that movie so much. Nobody on this planet was rooting for that movie harder than I was, just because I wanted it to do well. And I thought the trailer looked promising,
And then
but
they had all the releases, like they had the images of the demon, like the
mhm,
practical effect, and I was like, okay, where is this going? They're gonna have the demon appear, and I was like, wow, is he gonna go for it? Like I thought he was gonna do like what he did with Ends,
yeah.
Halloween Ends, like oh, he's gonna turn it on its head and do something weird, and then yeah, I feel like the studio. I can't confirm this, but I feel like they had to have reeled him in on some bullshit because I don't know why. And then to bring back what's her name? Is it Helen Mirren?
I think
The
so.
mom from the original
Oh,
Chris.
Ellen Burstyn.
Yeah, yeah. For them to bring her back just to do that to her, it's like and to bring back Linda Blair, like all that just to I was like, wow, what a fucking waste. What a waste.
I didn't
Bummer.
even no, personally, I didn't even want Linda Blair back. It didn't make any
No.
sense. It's, I was kind of 50-50 on the Ellen Burstyn thing, but the way they wrote her character was atrocious. And the like you said with the effects and everything, and the fact that you don't get any of it in the movie is just that breaks my heart. But there's
Yeah.
also the whole concept of it. It was meant to be a trilogy, just like Halloween, and now we'll never get to see what was planned for the other two. Because I'm sure a lot of that was like just breadcrumbs for the next one. So
Them getting the little girl, the other little girl from hell.
yeah,
It's probably going to be some Dante's Inferno type thing where they go into hell. And then it probably was going to be something like The Cell, like this really weird universe where they're exploring to find their, something which, again, not something I want, not something that's just Hellraiser 2, like it's like,
Insidious.
right. It's like, yeah, yeah, it probably would have been closer to that. Like it would have just been dark and lit so that they didn't have to do a big spawn CGI hell. But like, um, yeah, and now they're gonna do another one. It's like they're just gonna start over, and that's what I'm saying is like this weird IP shit. Like,
Mhm.
and but people will go see it. People will pay the money to go see it, and it's like just rip it off and call it something else, like they
Yeah.
used to do. Like everybody did the '80s. No, no, no. This isn't a rip off. This is an original idea, and everybody knows. Oh, you're ripping off Halloween,
Yeah.
but I don't care. I'll go see it. You don't have to call it Halloween Reborn or something, or it's just you know
Look at Friday the 13th. That's the most successful Halloween ripoff of all time, and it did
right,
really well.
right, and it spawned its own thing and its own rip-offs, but nowadays they just would have said, okay, it's Halloween by the lake, and they would have found a way to buy into the IP instead of just doing their own thing.
Instead of
Yeah.
Christmas in July, you got Halloween in June.
Right. It's just rip it off, man. Just do what everybody else did. Do what all hardcore bands do. Just rip it off and cover your tracks, you know?
I will say the fact that they do have someone else at the helm of the upcoming Exorcist movie, and they're not outright saying, I don't think that it's going to be a trilogy. I think Mike Flanagan is the right guy for the job. I think he's always been the right guy for the job. Just get it out of Blumhouse's hands because they can't do anything with their movies.
And this is just me blowing right. Again, I'm not a producer. This is just me blowing smoke up my own ass. But so it's not like my idea matters. But to me, the only way to make an effective sequel to The Exorcist is to kind of do what they were doing in the original of like, okay, is this real?
Hmm.
Is there or and then, like in my head, you'd have like a fucking former priest with dementia in a nursing home, and something happens with the staff and it's all these like people in this nursing home left to their own devices, and there's something going on, and you're like, is there a possession, or is this people with dementia? And it would probably be considered ableist, right? And it would probably, you'd have to be delicate with it, but then like this kind of like The Witch, you're watching it, and it's like this guy's performing this brutal exorcism on a roommate, and you're watching it going, God, man, is this person really possessed, or are these elderly people just torturing another patient? And like that's the only way in my mind to like do something comparable and uncomfortable. Otherwise, it's just you're not making a sequel to The Exorcist. You're making a sequel to all the films that ripped off The Exorcist.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
true.
that's my problem with it. And that's why three rules, because it's an entirely different thing.
Yeah, there's enough there narrative wise to connect it to the first one, but it's nothing like the first one.
Right. It's just it's what nowadays would be in the Exorcist universe.
Yeah, the cinematic universe.
The extended Exorcist universe.
Well, before I let you go, normally I have a speed round at the end of every interview. It's always my favorite thing to do. Normally, I kind of mix it between like music related questions and horror related questions, but I'm going to give you five of both because I think we've covered both pretty evenly and I want to keep this going. I'm going to start with the horror questions first. So, if you want to elaborate, you're more than welcome to. I'm not too strict with the speed part of this. The first one, your favorite slasher.
The first one that came to mind was the Prowler,
Favorite Universal monster.
Creature from the Black Lagoon,
Favorite sequel.
Dawn of the Dead,
Um, if one movie that you would remake if you had the chance.
Pumpkinhead.
And the horror movie that had the biggest impact on you.
Man, like you said, we covered a lot of these. I think it's gonna be Silver Bullet
Oh,
on that one.
nice.
Like those, like that, or it's either gonna be that or Blair Witch Project.
Oh, that's a good one too.
So one of those two.
All right, now on to the music ones. Your favorite song to play live.
Condolences and Autumn Nights.
Your most embarrassing moment on stage.
Slipped on a spilled beer during a set, and I went headfirst through the drum kit, and I had a big ass black eye within like 60 seconds,
Oh,
and that was like song two. I was
Jesus.
Yep.
Your dream tour lineup.
To see or to play.
Either one.
To see would be like Converge, Seven Angels, Seven Plagues, Pulling Teeth, and then like Martyr AD or and I'm Broken Wings, some dumb fucking thing like that. To play would be like touring with Vane, and then probably like some screamo band like Jerome's Dream or something like that.
Wow. Your favorite thing to do outside the music.
Uh, Making and watching films.
Nice. I had a feeling that would be the answer.
Yeah.
Um, and the last one, this is always my favorite one, the song you wrote that means the most to you.
It's on this record that's coming out. The song "An Unscarred Purpose,"
Mm,
which is about my son. So that one is that one is, I can't wait to come out.
yeah, that's a highlight for me too. Um,
Hell yeah, thank you.
well, that was everything that I had for you for this go around. We definitely need to do this again and talk horror some more.
Yeah, like I said, dude, I told my wife, I was like, it'll be like half an hour probably, something like that. It's like I can just sit here and bullshit I could keep you on the phone all night just
Same.
talking. So
I'm the same exact way. I always say, "Oh, it'll be 20, 30 minutes." Never is.
yeah, right.
But was there any closing message that you had to any Wounded Touch fans watching?
Yeah. Uh, Ask us about the samples and talk to us at the merch table about movies so we can waste time talking about that. People always want to talk about records and music, especially newer bands. And I'm just always like, if we're shouting in between songs over house music, let's talk about movies, please. Like, or like, if yeah, anything movie related, just come shoot the shit with us about that, or like old horror games.
That's awesome. I love that.
A big
Um,
thing.
well, thank you again so much for the time. This was so much fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude.
I appreciate you doing this. I know it's getting late, but this is awesome. I love the new album. I can't wait for everybody to hear it. To everybody who watched this interview, thank you for watching. Check out the new Wounded Touch album, A Vivid Depiction of Collapse. It's out May 16th via Smart Punk Records. And until the next interview, stay tuned, stay scared, and I'll catch you later.